thank you very much for joining me here at my third Vet Find Remarkable vlog episode. And today we're going to talk about the Good Veterinary Workplace, reality or pipe dream. Now, I've got two wonderful guests, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Gudrun. If you could maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a past president of the British Veterinary Association, and while I was an officer in the British Veterinary Association, I was particularly interested in workplaces and actually what made me in the workplace, actually what made them happy veterinary professionals and wanted to stay. So that led to a collaboration with one of the universities and looking into this, which, as you can imagine, led down rabbit holes. So that's my passion. That's why I think I'm joining you tonight. My other jobs I'm probably one of those portfolio people. So I've done lots of jobs in industry, in clinical practice, in charity, different business organizations. So I'm one of those vets, I think, that is just really grateful for the degree that I have, that still doesn't know what she wants to be when she's older, but actually is hoping that through my experience, through working with the British Veterinary Association, I can kind of help others sort of enjoy the veterinary diverse career that I've had. And I suppose that's where I am, where I'm going, I have no idea, but my passion is to try and just make it a little bit better.
Well, given what you've helped with the BVA's workplace initiative, so we'll talk about that soon, but I'm sure we're all very thankful for that. Josh, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. I got to be honest with you, after hearing Gudrun's introduction, I really just want to say I'm just here to bask in her amazingness. So yeah, I'm Josh. I am, I guess, a lifelong veterinary professional addict. I've done just about every role in a veterinary hospital except be a doctor, although maybe you could argue that I was kind of half a doctor once when I had to be the right hand for a doctor who had a broken right arm.
I'd say that's more than half.
Yeah. The right hand can be more than half for sure. So my current passion is I have this crazy cockamamie idea that all veterinary professionals should feel fulfilled in their work every day. And so I started a consulting firm where I try and sort of take the science of human thriving. What does positive psychology tell us? Positive organizational scholarship, positive leadership, all these kinds of things, and bring it to the veterinary space in really digestible and applicable ways so that collectively we can create these environments in which we really thrive in our work. So that's kind of my big thing. And I presume that's a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yes, and I'm going to kick off with the first thing that I'd like to discuss. And Josh, I'm just going to stay with you. And that is, do you have an idea? Do we know what the work-related challenges are that we as veterinary professionals are facing today?
Yeah, especially today, right? Like I talk to veterinary professionals constantly, and I have to sort of remind myself that working in veterinary medicine is hard work under normal circumstances. A year ago, this was a difficult profession to be in. It's very demanding work. It sort of challenges our minds and our hearts on a routine basis. It tends to be very fast-paced work. It's often unpredictable and highly variable. And so, these are difficult things. And we of course, we feel called to this work. And so we can feel energized to meet that challenge, but that's sort of the normal state of affairs. And in the last 8 months or so, it feels like, I don't know, we've had a decade's worth of work packed into half a year. It's been incredibly challenging. And the things that I tend to see or hear from the folks that I'm interacting with is that, it was hard a year ago and now it feels overwhelming. It's like, almost a boundless litany of cases, way more than we could ever handle before. I read somebody was talking the other day that their hospital in one day attended to, so a small animal practice, I believe a 3-doctor hospital, attended to 84 patients in just that single day. I mean, that's insane amounts of caseload. And then on top of it, the uncertainty of just sort of the circumstances of our world right now, and who knows what the future holds, and how long is this pandemic going to last? And, being essential workers here in the States and having to go in every day and work your butt off all day long, each and every day under these circumstances, it's difficult.
It is, but Gudrun, even before, I mean, the veterinary profession has been a challenging profession for a very long time. Yeah, please.
Yeah. I know it's a topic I can't be quiet on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and this is I suppose where we came to at the British Veterinary Association is we knew we had this kind of leaky bucket. We were having really enthusiastic students come in, graduating, and then we were looking like 5-6 years down the line when we were doing surveys, and they're not happy. 50% are looking to potentially leave. There's just some things going wrong. So what's going wrong? And this is where we thought, right, we've got loads of anecdote, and we all know we've got anecdote, and anecdote can be really powerful and it's really useful. But sometimes if you're trying to do that persuading in big groups and persuading a movement, we needed a bit of evidence. So we did some work with the University of Exeter, and that came up with our first research on satisfaction, motivation, and retention. So what satisfies someone, motivates them, and retains them in the profession. And there was sort of 4 or 5 kind of key things. And briefly, I see that as a kind of intrinsic value of why I want to do my job and what keeps me in there. And one of them was fitting in. So, basically, do I look above me to those who are maybe my leaders, but not just leaders in the professional associations, but actually my leadership team in the practice? And do I fit in? Do they look like me? Do they have the same values as me? So can I fit into that? And if I feel like I can fit in, I can be my authentic self, I feel better. The other one was obviously not facing discrimination, which should be a no-brainer, yet we found that happens, sadly. Third one, feeling valued and admired. So do I feel that the work that I do is valued by those around me and admired by those around me? And we found some really simple stuff with that. Things like, did others in my team come and ask me for my opinion? And it was amazing, just being asked your opinion. I'm sure Josh can go into more of the detail, but how good does that make you feel that you're included and you're valued? Endorsing long hours, and this was a really tricky one to unpick. So it said those who endorsed long hours actually kind of felt a bit better, which you might go, well, that's weird. We don't want people to endorse long hours. But actually, if you flip that on its head, we shouldn't be in a state where you have to endorse long hours to feel good about what you're doing, because ultimately you'll burn out. So we need to tackle that culture that vets should just work and work and work, and that's our vocation. And if you don't work, you're not dedicated. So sort of those kind of simple things. And also one that we all know, but having a role model, is there someone around me in the practice that can help guide me, that I think I can go to them, they can help me, I actually like the path they've taken. So just those simple stuff to begin with, we found you miss out on those or you don't acknowledge them in practice, and people kind of lose that sense of what, they wanted to be a vet, but actually the environment I'm working in is just grinding me down. So that was our evidence piece.
Yeah,
well, that's interesting.
I think.
Josh?
Sorry, Audrey, if you don't mind, I love what Gudrun is saying here. And I think these are wonderful, wonderful examples. And when you really, when you take a moment to really soak in what you're talking about, to me, I hear culture. I hear about the cultural norms and the demands placed upon us in the environment that we're in. And, I think one of the things about our field, you talk about these enthusiastic students, and you see this really at all levels, right? Somebody who wants to become a veterinarian or wants to be a nurse, or even, just wants to work in the reception desk or be a kennel tech, these kinds of things, they come into this work very energized and very enthusiastic. And then we have a tendency overall to place them into an environment that really does nothing to support or enliven that intrinsic motivation. In fact, often it depletes it or dismisses it, and we externalize the environment, and we make it very much about, the work that you have to do each and every moment, and just, pardon my language, getting shit done on a day-to-day basis. And if we're not doing something to help folks feel included, to help them feel valued, to help them feel that sense of autonomy and really experience the purpose and meaning of the work that they do, then over time, it just becomes work. And when it becomes work, that's when we start moving down the path of burnout.
And, it's interesting because I recently read a book, and I forget the name now. I think it was something, you're clever, so why aren't you happy? Or you're successful, so why aren't you happy? And the author describes what he calls MBA. And to be truly happy in your job, the 3 things: mastery, belonging, and autonomy.
Well, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? And I wonder whether this is a trait of, and this is all sort of, again, we're coming into anecdote again, but of being a vet, we are very we're trained to look at something, to diagnose it, to come up with an answer, to treat it. We're on that path. And I think that when we then work with others, and particularly when we manage others, we take that to the nth degree and it becomes micromanagement. And I think, and rather than actually treating them as that autonomous person, we almost try and help too much to give them all our information. And that comes back to the feeling admired. It's actually stop and ask the person, what do you think about it? How can I help you? Rather than sort of taking over, which we all do, because I think that's part of our training, to get it done and do the right thing. And this is how I help. But I think, and this is how we, when we mentor people, it's something, it is about, okay, let them decide the journey and you're there to help them succeed on that journey. And there are times when you have to step in, but it's about a partnership. And I think it's tricky because with management, which is a skill in itself, we haven't always mastered that as leaders of our profession. And I think that's where the difficulty comes in, of giving people that flow. And also I think as professionals who work in that, we're not that good at saying, actually, hang on a minute, I want to do it this way, or I want to do it that way, because we get in the status of our job, or actually sometimes saying, this isn't right for me. It's not about practice, but it's not right for me. There's somewhere that is right for me. So with the work that we've been doing with the British Veterinary Association, it isn't, you can never say it's an employer's responsibility or an employee's responsibility to treat me like a child or not treat me like a child. It's got to be that relationship. Both have to work at it. And that's, I think, the bit we're not that good at. And
thus, Josh, as if I wrote a script for Gudrun there, it brings me into, would you mind defining for us the psychological safety? And then maybe with what Gudrun just said, what psychological safety in the workplace then would entail?
Yeah, so psychological safety is a concept that I'm incredibly passionate about. Now, it actually appears in the research literature 50 or 60 years ago, I believe in the 1960s, and I'm trying to recall the name of the original researcher, but it sort of really started to gain prominence in the research in the late 90s. Dr. Amy Edmondson, who's a researcher at Harvard, she's the Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management at Harvard, conducted a study that sort of, sort of set the tone for the trajectory of her career for the last 25 years. And it started as kind of this big academic venture, and then Google took it up, and now Microsoft recently published a study that they did internally. And, I'm sort of setting the stage for what it is here by saying that over and over and over again, we find that the most successful organizations, the most efficient, high-performing teams have a high level of psychological safety within the team. And that in its absence, we're really putting a cap on what we can do, how we can learn and grow together, how we perform, and what are the outcomes that we're going to get. So what is it? It's essentially, it's this cultural norm within a team environment that says, you know what, in this team, it is perfectly safe to take interpersonal risks. It is safe to do things that feel a little awkward, that feel a little dangerous, to how others may perceive us. Things like saying, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? Things like, ooh, I think I just messed that up. I'm not sure what to do. Things like, I really feel like our approach here isn't working. There's a better way. Let's talk about it. These are all risky things to do in an environment. And Gudrun, you made such a wonderful point about how, we're often not very good at this to begin with as veterinary professionals, really standing up and saying, okay, this is the way that I would like to do it, creating our own boundaries, challenging ourselves and each other. We're sort of taught that we need to be perfect. And then we get into the work environment, and that just further enhances it. And so we have to cultivate this as an environmental norm. It's not something that happens on accident or by mistake. We create it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the psychological safety, I first came to hear about when we took evidence for the working group document. And it was, it's like a light bulb. It's like, yeah, absolutely. This is how we should cultivate a workplace environment. And interestingly, we put the psychological safety bit in our one of our 7 headings, which was mental health and well-being, because actually, it could go in other bits of it, but it was perfect in there because this is what helps to create that mental health positive space and that well-being space, which was quite new to me at the time. But you kind of go, yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah. No, you're right. We see
once you read it,
very, Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead. Aubrey.
once you've read it, you can't believe that we've not done it. Sorry for interrupting. Yes, it's just, I'm very interested, Josh, I'm very interested in this too, have been for some time, reading the book that she published, busy doing that. And yes, it's just, it makes so much sense. And I was very, very enthused and overjoyed when I read the publication from the BVA. And, I have a question for Gudrun, and that is, well, you've created this document, but or this initiative, and you've got 64 practical points for practice.
Yes,
I think
probably.
It's 64. maybe just the 2 or 3 that come to mind. If you could just maybe give us an idea.
Yeah, so we were very aware that the actual code is a big chunky document, and what we don't want is a big chunky document. Everyone goes, that's great, and nobody, well, 1 or 2 people get to the end of the however many pages, 70 pages it is. So there's the code which people can work through, and then there's a lovely poster. I don't know if you can see it, the lovely poster with all the 7 bits on it, and I mean the bits that I think I came to. So we put culture as number 7. And I think, Josh has talked about culture when we introduced ourselves, and he said, that's culture. And we put it at number 7 because actually, once you work through the other 6, everything fits into culture. So for me, if you don't almost start, read number 7, culture, which is, positive workplace culture where we communicate, promote shared values and attitudes. Regularly assessing and reviewing culture, being aware of wider impacts, etc. And then you almost read back and see, how does my workplace fit into that culture? And you work through the code and you think, this is how I build my culture. Because sometimes I think what we've realized, and what I'd like people to see with the document is people go culture and everyone goes, I don't know what that means. I can't do it because it's too big and I don't know. So, a normal human thing is, it's overwhelming, I won't do anything. And what we've done by the 7 steps is break it down to help build your culture. And your culture, I mean, Josh's culture in a practice might be different than my culture because it's the team of people you work in. And that's where I come back to what I said before is sometimes somebody might be having a bad time in a practice. And what we're trying to avoid is them going, actually, I don't like the profession, I'm not a good vet, this isn't for me. It's actually, no, that practice isn't for you and you're not for that practice. And that's okay. That's the psychological safety bit. That's okay. Let's find one that works better for you and let's find someone who works better for that practice. And it's okay to say that.
Instead of saying, I've failed, I'm not a good vet. When people ask me how I, about culture, it's very simplistic the way I explain. It's just that people like us do things like this.
Yeah. And
if it's not how you want to do things, then there's nothing wrong with it. That's perfectly okay. This is just not the correct culture for you. And you can see that in these things happen. It's just not just in our profession, in all professions, in all workplaces. So Josh, the question then next is, what does a good veterinary workplace actually look like? If you had to put it into a jobs ad, because this is what GuavaVet is for, what would it look like? Because we always advertise jobs at people rather than to them. And we always list these wonderful things that we do for our clients and for our patients. But what is in it for me? What does a good veterinary workplace look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aubrey. And so I'm going to play off a little bit of what you just said, that culture, if I may mess up the words that you use, but culture is how people like us do what we do. Or something, right? Something like that.
I said people like us do things like this.
Do things like this, yes. So I think that actually plays into the answer to your question. A good veterinary practice is whatever matches with how you want to be, who you want to be, your personal values, what you want to bring to the profession. What would it look like to be working in a meaningful place? So I think it actually does start with the candidate. And I think you make a great point. We do often advertise at people, and we describe, I mean, if you took the identifying details out of 10 veterinary ads, you might actually have 10 ads for the same practice. That's how it seems to look, right? We have this equipment and we have this many staff, and we like to serve our clients and provide high quality care. Like it's the same thing over and over again, and that doesn't really help people differentiate. Is this a place that fits with me or not? And so I think we need to start there and really defining, what are our norms here? How do we behave? How do we want to behave? What's the kind of human being that would be a great match for the culture that we already have? And that goes back to what Gudrun was saying. You have to be able to assess that in the first place. You have to have some awareness of what is our culture? What are the norms that drive how we do things here? What are the type of people who fit well in this, so that we can then put that out into the world in a really authentic and genuine way, which starts to cultivate the psychological safety from the advertisement forward.
Gudrun.
Yeah. I suppose, I mean, if I look at, if I was going to a practice, what would I be looking for? So my norms would be, I'd like to see that they wrote on there, we're working through BVA code, or we've joined in with the BVA code, we're in RCVS practice standards, we are a green veterinary team, and this is how we show it. We embrace flexibility, but no, we've got to get the job done. Some of our team have managed to expand their skills in this, and this, and not just a list of clinical skills or clinical certificates they've got, but showing actually, our values are in sustainability, they're in the workplace culture, and this is how we've proven it. They're in growing our team in their career by whether that's our receptionists have been through this diploma, our clinical team are working to this, just those kind of things that actually I might go, oh, I could see myself flourishing in there, because actually when I walk through that door, I can talk about what's important to me. I'm not putting on this mask, I'm being my authentic self. So I walk out my door at home, I walk into my practice, and I'm the same person. And the job advert kind of leads me to that. Whereas for me, I presume they've got an X-ray machine. I presume they've got an ultrasound machine. I kind of presume that. And if not, that'll be quite obvious. But I want to know what they talk about in the staff room. I want to know what makes them tick. And I think you can do that in an advert. It's not easy, but you can do it.
Well, here's the thing that I was thinking about, and I've been toying with this idea. So we perform veterinary medicine. We act. It's a stage. The consultation room is a stage. We perform, and if people don't like the show, they get upset and they don't come back, or they complain. Now, if we perform, wouldn't we be better to, rather than interviewing, if we audition? We audition the people who come and work for us, which means that those candidates audition us too. Josh.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great insight. I think one of the things that we've done, at least here in the States, one of the things that we've done a really good job of, well, let me rephrase that. One of the things that we've put a lot of energy and time into over the past 10 years is how to interview candidates. What are things you want to include in a job ad? How do you conduct an interview? What are some behavioral questions you can ask, so on and so forth? I think we've put less energy into the flip side of that coin, which is that, a really good match between a veterinary candidate and a veterinary practice is precisely that. It's a beneficial mutual relationship. And, I would never hope to, get into a relationship with another human being that's fully one-sided, where they are just interviewing me and deciding if they want me to be in their life or not, or where I only get to decide if they get to be in my life or not. It has to be both ways. And so I think empowering the candidates with things that they can look for, which is very much similar to what we've been talking to, really take some time as a candidate to sit down and write out the kind of list that Gudrun just shared. What are the values that are important to me? How do I need to feel at work to feel my best? What would that look like? What will people be saying and doing around me that will contribute to me really thriving and flourishing in a workplace? And then formulate questions around that don't just ask people, do you do this or do you believe in this? But how? How do you do this? How do you cultivate and nurture psychological safety in this team? How do you make it okay for people to ask for help or to admit to mistakes? How do you elevate the experience of purpose in the work? How do you show your team that the work that they do on a day-to-day basis actually matters? Asking the potential employer those kinds of questions, I think, is just as much a part of the audition as being auditioned.
There's a difference in culture between Josh, the US. People are much more forthcoming, open, give their opinion. I lived in the UK for 13 years, had my own practice there, and things are slightly different, Gudrun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, I've not worked in the US. Obviously, we've had strong ties with US association bodies, etc. And I think there is a lot of commonality around veterinary surgeons worldwide. And actually, we're pretty much most started as small businesses. Obviously, corporatization, we'll get into medium enterprises, where the flow of technology, the pace of change, all that kind of stuff is the same. Our intrinsic value is the same. There is always a cultural norm, for want of a better word. There is always something, and it perhaps in the UK we are more reserved, but I don't see big differences. There might be cultural differences in how we express a particular way of doing things, or a particular interaction, employee-employer interaction, but I don't see significant changes. And then interestingly, veterinary is becoming more and more internationalized. So a lot of the corporates are spanning many, many countries. And so we're starting to see a lot of similarities anyway, and actually really good stuff coming from one and sharing it and spreading it around. But I think, ultimately, as human beings, however we express it, and particularly, at work and veterinary surgeons, we want to go in, we want to do a fulfilled job. We want to be our authentic self. We want to have that positive relationship with the client animal owner. We want to, do the best for animal health and welfare. And it's building that environment around us, no matter where you are, that fits for that. And I don't see a big difference, because actually our outputs are always what we want is the same. The people we're putting in are very similar. There are maybe differences in how we do it, but I think we can all learn from everyone doing all the bits that we all do, and kind of tailor it a little bit to our own cultures, maybe.
Yeah. We must remember it's the same in every single veterinary practice all over the world, is that there are two sides of the consultation or exam room table. You have the client. Without them, you have no practice. You have the team. Without them, you have no practice. And we need to be sure that we create the environment that is optimal for both sides of the consultation room table. Well, this time of year, we're getting into the end of the year, and it's a time of contemplating the future. On both the GuavaVet app side and the Retriever in the US, you see a spike come this time of year, just mostly after Christmas and New Year into January. And, we've got a few minutes left, and I'd like maybe for you guys, Gudrun, maybe you start, and then Josh, the same question for you is, young veterinarians, newly qualified veterinarians in South Africa, they will get into the jobs market now in January. Our academic year works from January till December. But even those vets and nurses who are currently in positions, where they feel maybe it is time for a change, what advice would you have for them? What should they look for, Gudrun?
I think first, acknowledge that you think you want to change, and then try and acknowledge why. Is it a push factor? Is it a pull factor? And so a push factor can be quite negative of, I don't get on with the people here, the rota doesn't fit, they won't let me do flexible working, et cetera, sort of negative reasons. The pull factor is, actually, I really want to do a postgraduate something in this particular area, or I might want to go and specialize in this. So I think it's really, really useful to identify those reasons, because I think they make a difference. And so if it is a push factor and it's something negative, have you exhausted all that you feel capable of doing to change that in the practice? Because sometimes it seems easier to go than confront it. And that's not a problem. If you really feel like that and that's right for you, then do it. But the grass isn't always greener. And it's such a shame when people do that, and actually they could have made a difference in their environment they're in. If it's a pull factor, great, celebrate it, tell your practice, I love working here, but I really want to go and do this. And do you know what, I might come back. And actually that's a really positive experience, because you might come back, or you can feed in back into them. Go do it, because if you don't do your pull factor, it'll always be there. But if, let's say you go and you think, no, I need to go and do something, make sure you know what you want. If you can, try and stage it and do it, organize it yourself. Never feel that you have to go now, in a rush, because it makes you anxious. You may make poor decisions. So try and be in control of it. decide what you want, write it down, talk to people, look around, be proactive. It's always easier to say this because people have got bills to pay, so we have to work. And then don't be afraid to go for an interview and turn it down, and we've all been, and we've been overwhelmed that somebody wants us to employ us and we go, yeah, I'll take the job. And actually it wasn't right. And then it's really uncomfortable. So try and make sure you've written down what you want, because, when you're interviewing people, it's really powerful when they say, actually, what I'm really looking to do in the next 4 years with you in this practice, I'd really like to have achieved this. How can we work together to help that happen? Or I really enjoy this about your practice. Could I get engaged in this? So I think my top tips are: work out why you think you want to go, try and change the environment you're in. If it's a pull, go do it. If it's a push and you really want to go, make sure you're in control, set yourself a timeline and be in charge and in control of it. And don't be afraid to turn something down.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Josh.
Well, I think I started off by saying that I was here just to bask in the amazingness of Gudrun, and so I'm just gonna play off of some of the amazing things she's just shared. Well, one thing that really stood out to me that you said was, you said, be sure you know what you want. And I really like this idea of sort of the push factor versus the pull factor. It can be very easy, especially when we're in a state of unhappiness, to be leaving a place out of a sense of avoidance. And if we're in an avoidance mindset, if we're going to look for another practice to work in, simply under the auspices or the umbrella of what I do not want, then we're limiting ourselves, and we're not as likely to really reach out and find that potential perfect match or magical practice to be in. And so what I would encourage folks to do is, I think it's fine to look at the things that we are trying to get away from, those push factors, but also take some time to really sit down and think about, and maybe even write out, what do I actually want? What are the factors that I need to have in place that will help me be my best self in this field? And write those out and start looking for those as well. Certainly it's okay to look for the things, to avoid the things that you don't want, but also identify the things that you do want. And then along with that, one thing that I really am starting to encourage a lot of veterinary professionals to do, which I realize can be very hard for many of us, myself included, I think we need to start learning to intentionally replace perfection with good enough. And I think that, if we're out there in the job market looking for the perfect practice, we're going to spend our entire careers feeling let down. And what we need to do is we need to identify, what are the things that we want? What do we need to have in place to help us thrive and succeed? And what's going to be good enough to get us there? And if we can get into that mindset of good enough, looking for a good enough practice to work in a good enough culture with good enough leadership, my gosh, we're going to set ourselves up for success far more likely than if we're looking for perfection.
Geez, well, I wish I had the wisdom of the two people here when I started out. That's amazing. And guys, thank you so much for your time. I think in the a few minutes remaining, Gudrun, why don't you, if you've got, where can the Guava Vet viewers find you? Do you have anything that you'd like to tell us about? Publications, talks?
Yeah. So I'm terrible at putting myself out there and telling people where I am, but I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm definitely on LinkedIn. So anybody, please message me and I'll try and help. I never say no. That's part of my problem. As much as I keep telling people, say no, I never do. That's when I have no time. Publications, absolutely. So there's if you Google it, there's a research study which we did with the University of Exeter, which is open access. We'll have my name on it, and Professor Michelle Ryan and Chris Begney, the two main co-authors on there. So it's worth reading that. It's also worth going onto the British Veterinary Association website, having a look at their details. If you're a UK vet, it is well worth subscribing as a member.
Absolutely.
Benefits are huge. I mean, everything that I do is for the British Veterinary Association. There's various talks out there that I've given that you'll find on the web. I'll be speaking again for the British Veterinary Association at their some various things. So, but yeah, just feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. That's where I normally am, and I'll get better at updating that so people can say where I am speaking, because I do speak at places rubbish at publicising it.
I'll put links and information in the show notes. Josh, over to you.
Yeah, so I have a consulting firm, Flourish Veterinary Consulting. You can find that at flourish.vet. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm active on there. I write several articles for a blog post, for publications here in the States, so on and so forth. And I'm actually in the process of writing a book for AAHA, the American Animal Hospital Association, on positive leadership, the science of positive leadership and how it can be utilized in veterinary medicine. So that, if everything goes well, should come out sometime next year.
Listen, guys, I know you're very busy and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to meet you guys in person soon.
Thank
Yes,
you.
me too. Take care. Nice to
Bye.
meet you.
Bye. Bye.